But anyway, so let's see on that particular map right here. So just in case I refused able to try to land on not only the event space in case of Bowser Jr. was actually near to the star, but in addition to that though, I refused to also try to land on the steel trap as well. So either way. Oh, will you look at that? We've got an instant 10. So hopefully though, we can able to actually try to fetch our item right there for the item space. So although nothing very useful though, but it will be useful in some scenarios for specifically trying to, you know, distract any other computer players or anything else like that on the specific team. So, and it looks like Bowser Jr. is going to be using the swap mirror, and, oh, okay, so it did swap over to Bowser, which in some cases his teammate. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure that the swap mirror behaves exactly the same as the forms of how it does on the regular party roles, in addition to pro roles as well. So nothing different from there, aside from the fact that, well, obviously that was about the fact that, well, it has been quite a while since we actually mentioned something like this, especially because considering for the fact that, after all, that we've already shown you guys a bunch of modes, specifically on Switch 1, but ultimately though, we will be back onto Switch 1 at some point once we're able to dive into the unseen minigames for that majority of the process. So, anyways, oh jeez, that was close. Especially it's a good thing about the fact that my teammate Peach decides able to actually land on the item space, so that way, about the fact that we can able to get a chance to get ourselves our next star, perhaps. So, anyway, so we're going back to 2 versus 2 minigame again. And it may look like we're going to be going into the new minigame, which appears to be Bob-omb Makeover. Oh, this sounds pretty interesting. So let's see what we got right here. So, spray paint the Bob-ombs. The team with the most Bob-ombs of the color wins. Remember to shake the Joy-Con 2 often so you don't run out of paint. So, logically speaking, we are basically doing graffiti, basically, or specifically spray painting a bunch of Bob-ombs in addition to King Bob-omb as well. So it's kind of interesting to say the least. And by the way, I love the fact that with the actual satisfaction with that particular shaking your Joy-Con 2, because obviously though the HD rumble is much more advanced compared to the forms of how it does it for the regular Joy-Con controllers, which is very impressive at the time. So anyway, so with that being said though, let's go ahead and spray some colored paint with not only with Bob-ombs, but in addition to King Bob-omb at some point on the 3rd and final round. So, but if you pay attention to the actual gauge right there, that actually signifies about the fact that how much paint you've got left. So, it is all about shaking and all that stuff though, in order to able to refuel your paint back. So, I do like this minigame actually, because like I said before, I found it's very satisfying to be able to actually hear that rattle noise every time when you do manage to shake your Joy-Con 2 controller. So yeah, that's actually very impressive, like I said before. Although keep that in mind though, is about the fact that I'm pretty sure for the fact that when it comes to motion controls and mouse controls combined, it only works out for the better when it comes to Joy-Con 2 controllers, because I'm sure there's also another possibility you can also able to actually try to use the USB mouse accessory, but there's a lack of motion inside it. So because of that though, all you can really do if you do manage to able to use the regular mouse USB port onto your Nintendo Switch 2 is just by simply trying to move the mouse around and of course clicking 2 buttons in particular, one on the left or the one on the right. So that's about it basically. But there's no you know, motion gyro sensing controls with that particular USB mouse, so only Joy-Con 2 can deal with all that massive amount of capabilities as such. So, but anyways though, it seems to be more specifically we are getting close to the halfway point in terms of tag team roles before we move on to the final roles, which appears to be frenzy roles, which by that time until next Monday, that we can definitely try to able to show off frenzy rolls. So anyway, and there's also reassuring about this too, is about the fact that it may look like, for the fact that no matter what though, we got some very interesting news has been brought up just recently. That's what it appears to be for the fact that, like I stated earlier, since in the past 3 days or so, or technically 2 days ago actually, that I somehow accidentally predict for the fact that there's going to be a Nintendo Direct for this week, and I'm happy to report that the Nintendo Direct has been confirmed, but on general type, which I'm perfectly happy with that, especially after what just happened in previous few months back, specifically, not only Partner Showcase by the end of July, but as well as Indie World in the beginning of August. While looking back on those two specific directs, it just feels a bit lackluster, and on top of that, pretty disappointing at the same time, especially for the fact that, like, you get the idea about the fact that a lot of players have already been ticked off when it comes to physical game collectors out there. Likely also for the fact that when it comes to the majority of the third-party supportive games, has been conveniently enough though is actually going to be on game key cards on physical games, specifically Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, and in addition to Pac-Man World 2 Repack in the North American version specifically, and in addition to a bunch of games as well for third-party support, which, yeah, it still feels a bit mind-boggling to me, which, even then though, at the very least though, with ND World, it is decent, but not my favorite either. Well, because relatively speaking though, no wonder why that I refused able to actually decide to do a reaction videos all about not only Nintendo Direct's Partner Showcase type, but in addition to the forms of ND World presentation, now to be perfectly honest here. Especially because no matter what though, I'm obviously always going to be hyped when it comes to first-party Nintendo games as far as Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2 alike. Speaking of which though, it's about the fact that the General Direct will be indeed going to be confirmed until tomorrow for the likes of on Friday, the 12th of September this time, as opposed to Thursday, because I suppose it's a good thing they did somehow manage to not choose 11th of September, just because of all that, you know, tragic memories back then, which I suppose that's definitely a good move, especially because imagine if they try to able to actually bring up the Direct during that day. Oh man, that would be a missed opportunity. Whilst thankfully though, it has been confirmed until tomorrow, like I said before, and relatively speaking though, much like the forms of how it does it for the Nintendo Direct Nintendo Switch 2 presentation, it's going to be run for about approximately an hour, to be more specifically, 60 minutes, which is very, very, very large, and usually, relatively speaking, when it comes to the forms of specific details that we brought ourselves into, that it did state this. Tune in on Friday, the September the 12th, for the likes of not only 2 o'clock for the UK version, and in addition to that, though, I think there's also the European version as well for 3 o'clock for the afternoon or something like that. So, yeah, for the new Nintendo Direct, that's going to be roughly for about an hour or 60 minutes, much like the forms of Nintendo Switch 2 Nintendo Direct since in April the 2nd in 2025. So, I think this is generally going to be the second time that Nintendo Direct is now going to be on an hour time slot, or specifically an hour time length. So yeah, that's actually very impressive. So because of that, and what they're trying to bring ourselves into this time around though, is that they're trying to bring more information on not only upcoming Nintendo Switch 2 games, but also Nintendo Switch 1 games as well. So technically, that we can't be nice to Switch 1 because it's still not done! Gosh. Jeez, it's gonna be pretty maddening. But I'm very excited to see what's in store for us. Although I wasn't expecting to be able to try to do a reaction video or something like that. But unfortunately though, that particular video will be delayed until on Sunday. Well, this is mainly because at that point in time, for the fact that that particular Nintendo Direct alone did manage to able to actually came out about a day before Super Mario Bros. 40th anniversary, so we can definitely get a chance to finally get a chance to hear more about the Mario's potential moments, specifically the 40th anniversary celebration, perhaps. But then again, though, we have to wait and see what happens in due time. Specifically, though, on Sunday, like I said before, because like I said earlier, unfortunately, though, that particular video I'm going to be working on is going to be delayed until that day, on the Sunday, the 14th of September. So, but I digress. So, in fact, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day. Are you guys excited to able to actually try to watch the biggest Nintendo Direct ever? Not only for Nintendo Switch 2, but as well as Switch 1 stuff as well. So I'm pretty sure enough though is about the fact that we might able to actually also hear more about not only the release dates for not only Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, but in addition to Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate, and possibly for the 2026 release date for Final Fantasy VII Remake Rebirth, or technically Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, as a matter of fact, for Nintendo Switch 2, alongside with the forms of Xbox Series consoles. So because of that, yeah, my expectations is actually going to be pretty high in terms of the forms of the upcoming Nintendo Direct until tomorrow. So because of that, though, geez, it's going to be a lot of emphasis on money has been gone pretty much empty, or specifically, my wallet will be empty by then. So because of that, though, yeah, you get the idea for this point. So anyway, and there's also another thing else I'd like to point out as well, is that yes indeed, we actually got ourselves some bunch of information for the sake of the forms of the Apple event has already been happening, but I'll explain more about that in a moment. So for the most part though, when it comes to Nintendo Music app, it may look like that Golden Sun The Lost Age for the Game Boy Advance has recently been added to the Nintendo Music application. So because of that, I'm pretty sure we've only got one game left when it comes to, you know, Nintendo Music application, when it comes to Golden Sun game series. That's what appears to be none of it then. Golden Sun Dark Dawn from the likes of the Nintendo DS back in 2010, but I'm sure enough that was about the fact they'll eventually try to add that onto the actual application. So, and also as far as I'm aware, during the forms within the, well, let's just say in Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, it may look like in one of those scenarios we might be able to come across it ourselves the Scooby-Doo reference in the Sonic game, which appears to be that, according to the forms of Mario Kart Gamer Dude, did manage to point out that if you play as Vector in one of those haunted-themed racetracks, that apparently, though, there's going to be a Scooby-Doo reference, which, as far as I'm aware, it did state this: a haunted house, split up gang, and look for clues. So, yeah, that particular line of dialogue might sound a bit familiar to you if you remember watching the forms of a whole bunch of Scooby-Doo cartoons back in the day. Although, for me personally though, I wasn't really a big fan of Scooby-Doo to begin with. That still honored ghostly forms of Tom and Jerry cartoons, and in addition to nowadays with Looney Tunes, and especially noticeable with Tiny Toons. So, bless this me, because I love slapstick comedy humor, which I know for a fact it might be felt a bit over the top when it comes to some scenarios, so bless this me. So, anywho though, so let's get down to the forms of a bunch of announcements they did bring for the likes of the Apple TV recently, or specifically Apple events, because I keep on thinking about the forms of that application for some reason. But anyway, the first thing they did manage to bring up, which appears to be another version of the AirPod Pro, which appears to be this time around though, by the forms of AirPods Pro 3. So, yeah, for the sake of the forms of the first announcement they did bring for the Apple event. So, for instance though, AirPods Pro 3 were able to actually have hearing aids, and in addition to hearing test, hearing protection, and in addition to extraordinary sound quality, and also best fitting AirPods ever. So that means there's now a possibility you can now able to actually insert for about, let's say 5 different sizes when it comes to the forms of the cushioned bits or something like that. I mean, I haven't exactly utilized my AirPods, you see, so because of that though, and in addition to that though, the noise cancellation will only going to be for 8 hours for its activating for that particular noise cancellation. So yeah, that's something. And in addition to that, dust and water resistance, so that's something. And recycled plastic in a case for about 65%, so that's something, I suppose. And on top of that, there's also live translation, which is actually very interesting. Although, before we get into more details about this, here's a new minigame, Knock Knock Match. So, another mouse control minigames right there. So, knock on doors in time with your partner to find matching characters. The first team to find all the matching characters wins. So, yeah, you have to simply press the L or R buttons twice in order to be able to actually knock the door. So as a result though, I do kind of like this minigame actually. Especially noticeable, it actually encourages you to be able to actually do with like, well, it's hard for me to explain, but either way. Back into what I was saying about the forms of the AirPods Pro 3. Next thing they did point out is about the fact that the heart rate sensor is now a thing, and in addition to that, there's also iOS workout experience as well, and there's also transparency with hearing aids for about 10 hours. So, yeah, I guess it's that. And the release date has already been confirmed, and that could be also applied with any other Apple projects during that time as well, which, as a result, we've only just got about 8 more days, actually. So, because of that, for AirPods Pro 3, it's going to be releasing until the 19th of September, so that's going to be on Friday. So, yeah, in just about a week after, or a week before, or just after, actually, then he informs that particular Nintendo Direct coming up. So, yeah, I guess that's a perfect opportunity for the fact that we are still playing through Super Mario Party Jamboree, but this time around on Nintendo Switch 2, of course, so just in case we can able to actually try to show off some extra stuff on Nintendo Switch 2 before you're able to actually conclude every single aspect in terms of Super Mario Party Jamboree, and also trying to able to conclude every aspect when it comes to every Mario Party games, except for one, which is of course Mario Party E, because, you know, we still don't have the e-reader, you know, for the Game Boy Advance, so... But anyway, and there's also reassuring about this too, since in yesterday, that recently CapKing74, or Stuart, for those of you may be wondering, that he's now going to be moving on to his new Let's Play, which, as a result, he's now going on to a platformer genre at this time, which, as a result, yeah, because the last time we actually did done the platforming genre of games, which appears to be none other than Sonic the Hedgehog, or Sonic 06, if you want to be curious to call that game out, especially considering about the fact until next year, that Sonic 06 will become 20 years old until next year, which, geez, time flies. But then again, that'll be a topic for a later time, so, anyway, though, so yeah, he's going on to Donkey Kong Country Returns, specifically Donkey Kong Country Returns HD for Nintendo Switch, because, you know, it's actually based off from the 3DS version, but with high resolution and all that jazz, so I can possibly understand why he's basically going to be showing off the Switch version of Donkey Kong Country Returns, basically, so, because conveniently enough, though, is that both Sonic and Tails have already done the Let's Play of Donkey Kong Country Returns HD before, since at the very beginning, or specifically since, I would say since in February in this year so far, which, yeah, truth be told though, because obviously though, we are still focusing on, you know, 2 games at a time. Well, not this time around though for this week, because obviously though, you know, special events is about to happen, so, well, stay tuned for that, though, I suppose. But anyway, so... yeah, because conveniently enough, though, is about the fact that, let's just say, he's probably able to actually to take a break on RPG stuff for a long, long while. Because after all, he obviously did done a bunch of RPG stuff in a row in the past few months or years. Such as, for instance, though, he already did done... not only Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door for the GameCube version, and in addition to that, the extra video for the Switch version for its optional fights and stuff like that, and in addition to that, though, with the forms of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition for Switch, and in addition to, let's just say, Miitopia, and, I can't remember what's the other one, though, actually, because mind you, it has been quite some time since I actually have last catch up on him. So, because of that, although technically that, usually not only for Sonic 06 that he obviously did done the platforming genre of games, that also applies with, Kirby Mouse Attack, or Kirby Squeak Squad, for those who've lived in North America. So, yeah, about time, actually, to able to finally get a chance to not only going back into platformer kind of games, but also going back into the Donkey Kong Let's Play of the actual specific stuff as well, since, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat for technically the Wii version as part of the new play control, not the GameCube original, because, well, generally speaking, I was about the fact that, well, you totally get the idea what I was going to be on about, so... Anyways, though, the next thing they did bring up, when it comes to the forms of Apple events, and that's what appears to be not 1, not 2, but 3 different new models when it comes to Apple Watch. Specifically, Apple Watch SE3, and in addition to Apple Watch Series 11, and finally, Ultra 3. So because of that, I'm sure enough Ultra 3 is going to be a little bit pricier, compared to the forms of how it does it from the other 2 models like I mentioned earlier. So, they've obviously stated, first of all, in regards to the forms of, let's just say, for the sake of the forms of, I can't really tell for this point. Well, usually, let's start things off with Series 11 first, when it comes to Apple Watch. They did bring out Sleep Score, and in addition to irregular rhythm notifications and hypertransim notifications or something, and of course live translation. Battery life will last it for about a whole day, usually for about 24 hours a day, And in addition to that, there's also fast charging, and now they decide to bring 5G, and of course notes, and gestures, and of course there's also more scratch resist glass for about 2 times. So yeah, I guess that's all there is to it basically. And there's also 100% recycled titanium and aluminium cases or something like that. So I guess there's nothing else I can say in terms of the forms of Series 11. And now let's get into SE3 for the likes of Apple Watch, and they've somehow managed to brought up quite a number of things here and there. Like, for instance, there's the forms of S10 chip, and also temperature sensing, and there's also always on display functionality, and there's also 5G support, and of course on-device Siri, and there's also you know, sleep score as well as fast charging and live translation, and there's also media playback and a bunch more. And now let's get into the forms of the ultimate treatment, which appears to be Ultra 3. So no matter what though, they also brought up fast charging, and in addition to 3D painted case, or 3D printed case, as far as what I was meant to say. Although, again, I do apologize if the commentary gets a bit awkward sometimes, because I'm just so excited until tomorrow, especially if what's to come. Although I was expecting to try to mention about the forms of announcements they'll do bring for that particular Nintendo Direct coming up tomorrow, but like I said before, I think it's probably best if we save that up once we dive into Frenzy Rolls mode, or specifically Carnival Coaster for the better. So, but either way. So as you can tell, we somehow now got the Together dice. So as a result, we were able to try use that until the next couple of turns later. So anyway, alright, we got another new minigame, Domino Effect. Not to be confused as the same name as in the likes of the Mario Party DS minigame, except this time we are sorting out dominoes. So anyway, quickly line up enough dominoes to reach the flower pot. Press L/R on the toad to push the dominoes over. So, you know, it's kind of like the puzzle minigame of some sort. So, you're simply trying to angle yourself to able to try to insert those dominoes into the correct placement. Although, every once in a while, though, we have to avoid a lot of those enemies every once in a while, such as these swamps, stone eye walls, and occasional piranha plants, and etc, etc. So because of that though, it can be felt a bit mesmerizing sometimes when it comes to how this particular minigame plays out to be. Oh, and also we have to watch out for that particular sting bite as well, so either way. Although I'm pretty sure enough though is about the fact that when it comes to some of these mouse control minigames, they do have different stage variations or something like that. So I'm not entirely sure if I was able to show you guys everything when it comes to different stage variations, but I'm sure enough though we will try our best as soon as we can, so either way. So of course this minigame obviously encourages you to do a lot of cooperation sometimes, so I'm not exactly sure this is going to be the most efficient way, but I suppose this will basically do for now. And then once you're done with the layout, it's your chance to be able to get to Toad as quickly as you can. Oh, nice! A split-second react. Wow, that was a definition of a close call. And in fact, one thing I totally appreciate about the Jamboree TV portion of this package is that every single character models is actually now highly detailed this time around. So, for instance though, if you're trying to play as Peach, in specifically on Jamboree TV mode, you do realize about the fact that the textures on her hair looks a lot different this time around, which I get is probably because the Switch 2 is much more powerful in comparison to Nintendo Switch 1. So, but still, I'm very crazy to know, but in fact I'm very curious to know what specific games they'll try to announce or try to surprise us until tomorrow. But like I said before, that particular discussion can wait, unfortunately, so oh well. But either way, back to what I was saying about the forms of the Apple Watch series, specifically Ultra 3, that I somehow pointed out earlier. As far as I'm aware of, is about the fact that when it comes to Ultra 3, that it did manage to able to bring some interesting stuff here and there. Like, for instance though, they did manage to able to bring fast charging, just like the other two. And in addition to that, there's also a redesigned workout app. and of course 42 hours of battery life, so that's a bit of an improvement over the likes of how it does on the previous model. So pretty obvious stuff. And in addition to that, there's also Workout Buddy, and of course 5G is also supported. And in addition to largest display, when it comes to the phones, that particular, you know, Apple Watch in general. And in addition to that, there's also sleep score as well, and of course there's also satellite communications, so that's always that. So as you can see, we somehow used the friendship dice for the first time, and it actually functions pretty much exactly the same as in the double dice set. And in addition to that, it's almost like a combination of the forms the exact same scenario, as in not only you can able to actually use the double dice set, but in addition to that though, it functions kind of like the same way as you do able to actually recruit with someone for the Jamboree Buddy. Like as you can see on screen, that Peach actually decides to follow us depending on how much movements we've got. So yeah, because as you can tell, we've met up with Boo twice in a row in a singular turn, so it functions the same way as the Jamboree Buddy, and also the space will be also affected twice if you do manage to able to use the friendship dice. However, unlike the Jamboree Buddies, however though, the actual player is actually going to be going back into its the actual space that they somehow landed on the previous turn or something like that. Although it's a bit difficult to explain, because even then though, I just somehow got distracted by the forms that particular, you know, excitement is actually building up until tomorrow, which I can't stress enough about the fact that, in fact, kind of thinking about it, it's been about 5 months ago since we've last had a specific general Nintendo Direct, since April the 2nd in 2025, focusing only on Nintendo Switch 2. So yeah, no matter what though, it's about the fact that still, I'm very, very excited to know what games they'll try to bring for the likes of that particular announcement, ranging from not only for the last few portions of 2025, but also at the very start of 2026 and beyond. So yeah, that's going to be pretty exciting, which I know for a fact I'm still basically excited, you know, especially after what we just been through in the past few months back. Like, for instance though, we've already got 3 game-specific directs, which I don't mind about it too much, which, one exception mind you, which is Mario Kart Worlds, because we've technically already seen a bunch of information on that game just before that game-specific direct happened. And then meanwhile, we've also got Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is very exciting while looking back. And then also we've recently got Kirby Air Riders, which is also exciting as well. So I wouldn't be surprised about the fact that we might able to actually get ourselves Metroid Prime 4 Beyond game-specific direct next or something like that. Well, we shall wait and see what happens, especially because considering for the fact that, well, like I said before, my hype train is finally coming back, especially after, you know, 4 months ago, you know? Or technically, since almost 6 months back, since at the very end of March, because despite the fact it only focuses on Switch 1 stuff after all, just before we move on to the transition to Nintendo Switch 2, of course. So yeah, that's kind of surprising about the fact that we're actually getting not only a bunch of Nintendo Switch 2 stuff, but in addition to Switch 1 stuff all in one particular Nintendo Direct style, which it does remind me like a similar vibes back in not only in 2017, but in addition to 2018 as well. Because if you guys remember, back in those 2 years in particular, both on 2017 and 2018, when it comes to some of these Nintendo Directs while looking back, they somehow managed able to show us not only a bunch of stuff for Nintendo Switch, but in addition to the Nintendo 3DS as well. So yeah, it just feels remarkably similar, doesn't it? So probably this time around though, it's now going to be focusing on not only for Switch 1, but in addition to Nintendo Switch 2 stuff as well. So yeah, you get the idea for that. So as you can see, every time whenever you do manage to use the Together dice decides able to split apart. So, because that actually signifies for the fact that, oh, that's quite nice. We actually got 10 additional coins if we get a matching number. So yeah, that's actually very smart. So I don't suppose I've got enough to able to meet up with Yellow Toad or anything. So I might as well go here to try to land on the blue space just to be safe. So. And as far as the actual release date has been confirmed for Apple Watch, not only SE 3, but in addition to Ultra 3 and Series 11, all combined into one, by the way. they are all going to be releasing also until specifically the 19th of September. So, I mean, gosh, until by that time, actually, once we've basically done every single aspect, in terms of Super Mario Party Jamboree or something like that, it will be a possibility for the fact that we can able to end off the Let's Play just before those Apple projects will be releasing in just about a day ahead. So, I mean, it could be a far from potential, but either way, though, we'll have to wait and see what happens, depending on these some situations are involved or something like that. So of course, just like the forms of how it does on Pro Rolls mode, or should I say, Party Rolls, I should say, because generally speaking, though, in Pro Rolls, there's no way you can able to actually shoot off the boo. So ever since in Party Rolls mode, that you can obviously do some bit of button mashing if you somehow manage to get chosen by, you know, the boo stealing mechanic. So because of that, though, nothing new or anything else like that, only this time, for the fact that you can now able to actually only target it on one of their teams. So that's sure is something. So anyway, so we're going back into Domination once again. Now, here's the thing though, unlike the Switch 1 version, it does manage to show you a new record thing on here. Whilst this time around though, on Jamboree TV version of that particular minigame, the new record thing is not there, which means about the fact that, this is what I mean, about the fact that the online ranking system was absent on Jamboree TV. Because unlike in Super Mario Party Jamboree as the game itself, it does manage to contain the World Rankings mode, but not so much on Jamboree TV for some reason, which, either way, we still managed to get the exact same amount of button mashing since on the Switch 1 version, but only now, no new record, announcer, or anything else like that. So, I can totally see why that some players usually got so disappointed when it comes to Jamboree TV, which again, I'll talk more about that on my final thoughts between both Switch 1 and Switch 2 combined, until next week or something. So, alright, so we're now on turn number 19. So, anyway, so that's pretty much about it basically, and now we're going to the main elephant in the room, where it comes to the forms of the Apple event announcement, and as of course, yes indeed, not only does iPhone 17 exist, but in addition to that, a new model of iPhone also exists as well. So logically though, we're about to be getting not one, but technically 4 different models when it comes to the new phone, which appears to be not only iPhone 17, but in addition to iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max especially, but also we have ourselves a new iPhone Air, which as a result, yeah, it's very interesting to say the least. Although, let's start things off with the very beginning, with the forms of iPhone 17's existence. And for the most part, it does have the exact same amount of features as in iPhone 16, but there are some slight differences. Like for one, the camera eyes is now in a different position, and also a different shape as well. And second of all, there's a bunch of stuff they did manage to able to bring up when it comes to the iPhone 17 model, such as for instance though, there's the forms of Pro Motion, which actually goes up to like 120 Hz mode, just like the forms of recently for Nintendo Switch 2, but I digress. But anyway, and they also now able to actually bring in 48 megabits for the likes of the forms of dual vision camera system, and there's also a brand new chip which appears to be A19. And on top of that, there's also camera control styles, I'm presuming so anyway. And the action button still exists since iPhone 16. And there's also the forms of other stuff you know as well, which I'll explain more about that, because here we have another new minigame, Shell Hockey. Oh, this is going to be interesting. Hit shells into your opponent's goal. When more shells arrive, that's your chance to turn the tide in your favor. So, you know, this minigame reminds me of so much of Speed Hockey from not only from Mario Party 2, but in addition to Mario Party The Top 100 and Mario Party Superstars, whilst ultimately though, to me though, this minigame reminds me of Ice Moves from Mario Party 7. Now the reason why I say this is because you're able to actually move around with the actual plug and everything. So relatively speaking, this time around though, rather than just using the actual proper control stick, so instead, we are now going to be taking control with the mouse controls with Joy-Con 2. So, and to put it simply though, you have to score as many points as you can. So yeah, nothing else to it though. So anyway, back to what I was saying about the forms of iPhone 17. as far as I'm aware, when it comes to other features they've added in, such as for instance though, they're going to be bringing in, let's just say, 256GB storage as the actual starting storage capacity. So that's a massive improvement, I guess. And also regards sells 2 times optimal quality telephoto. And there's also Chromic Shield 2, which is likely a much more advanced version of the already existed Chromic Shield 1, since on Switch, no, I'm sorry, iPhone 16. Sorry, I keep thinking about something else, but either way. With 3 times better scratch resistance, and there's also Apple Intelligence, just like before, and now they're able to actually bring in center stage front camera. So yeah, that's actually quite interesting. And there's also all-day battery life, self-explanatory, and also faster wired charging, so yeah, nothing new from there, I don't think. So, I mean, mind you though, it's been about a year ago since I actually have last looked back on the previous Apple event, since in last September in 2024. So, either way though, that's what I can really say about this, I guess. So, now let's move on to turn number 20. So, naturally though, we are basically almost done with this, basically, when it comes to, you know, the long amount of turns situation. So, anyway. Yeah, let's bring out the phones to the next category with... Oh, are you kidding me? You got very lucky right there. Although, conveniently enough, though, the achievement has not been in existence on the Jamboree TV mode, by the way, so... Anywho, though, the next thing they bring up is, of course, iPhone Air, which does manage to bring in some interesting camera controls, and in addition to that, there's also, next generation portraits, like it making it so for the fact that it's going to be 24 MP for photos by default. And as far as I'm aware, they're also bringing in 4 lenses in your pockets, ranging from 26, 28, 35, and 52 mm respectively. So you do have multiple options when it comes to zooming functionality, but that doesn't even compare to the forms of a much more advanced version of iPhone 17, which we'll get into later. The next thing they did bring up when it comes to iPhone Air, and that's what appears to be action mode for the camera, and on top of that, audio mix with semaphore audio, and also, much like iPhone 17, there's also center stage from the front camera as well. So anyway, oh wow, another new minigame, but this time we have pullback attack, so this will be interesting. Pull back to charge up, then release to zoom into your opponent's goal. Shake the Joy-Con 2 if your car gets flipped over. So, because imagine if you managed to get hit by not only thwomps right there, but in addition to if you fell into the pool or something like that, then you have to restart the entire process again from, you know, point A to point B. So, and you have to score as many points as you could from going from point A to point B, basically. So, rinse and repeat, basically. So, but anyway, though, the next thing they added in, for the sake of the forms of iPhone Air, and that's what it appears to be, the actual phone is now going to be on 4K in 60 frames per second. So, that's always something. So, and also, in addition to that, there's also, let's just say, this very unique system, which appears to be the dual capture, which means not only you can able to record something from the back camera, but also the front camera as well at the same time. So yeah, that's actually quite interesting with that particular unique feature. So yeah, I guess that's all there is to it, basically. And of course, not to mention though, there's also other stuff you know as well, for the sake of the forms of iPhone Air. Like for instance though, there's ProMotion up to 120 Hz, just like the forms of iPhone 17 or something like that. And also 4 beautiful colors will be added in. And of course there's also A19 Pro chip or something like that. And of course there's also Chromic Shield backed for the sake of 4 times, like more resistance to cracks or something. Again, it's a bit difficult to explain about this clear sentence when it comes to something iPhone related, because now we can get into the forms of the main aspects when it comes to the existence of iPhone 17. That's of course not only iPhone 17 Pro, but in addition to Pro Max as well. So, what do I even begin with that? For instance though, with iPhone 17 Pro, they managed able to bring in all sorts of stuff, ranging from 3 stunning finishes, and there's also 4X and 8X Fusion telephoto, and there's also Gen Lock, and there's also Pro Wrist Raw, I think is what it says anyway, and also Viper Chamber, and also much like iPhone Air, there's also going to be A19 Pro chip or something like that, and even has the best battery life ever, which speaks for itself. And also they managed able to bring in not 1, but whopping 8 pro lenses in your pocket for the camera. Like, for instance, there's the focus mode, and there's also 13, 24, 28, 35, 48, 100, and 200 when it comes to the phones of for the actual lens. So, yeah, that's insane. And then meanwhile, when it comes to other features, nothing drastically different. There's still center stage front camera, just like iPhone 17 and iPhone Air. So, and finally, most notably though, the release date for the all 3 different phones in particular, or 4 if you want to count Pro Max variation. Oh, and by the way, when it comes to Pro version, when it comes to iPhone 17, you're able to actually access to 2 terabytes. So, yeah, I guess that's something. And yeah, the release date for iPhone 17, iPhone Air, and iPhone 17 Pro, and Pro Max especially, they're all going to be releasing in also on September 19th. So because of that though, wow, that's quite a lot of Apple projects during that time, wasn't it? So, but anyway, and there's also another thing else I want to point out, is about the fact that one of the most recent Everybody's Golf games, which appears to be Everybody's Golf Hot Shots, apparently though, it actually runs way worse on Switch 1 apparently, because it actually goes for about lower than 30 FPS, depending on the specific action, like if you hit the golf ball into a specific distance or something like that. So I'm pretty sure not that was about the fact that the PlayStation 5 version is going to be more superior because of all that very good frame rate and of course graphics itself as well. So unfortunately though, the Switch 1 version is not recommendable in regards to the phones of Everybody's Golf Hot Shots. So kind of a shame honestly, but thankfully if you do manage to play the game on Switch 2, that will solve most problems, despite the fact that you're still basically locked at 30 FPS or something like that. So, I suppose it really doesn't matter to the grand scheme of things, because you might still able to try to recommend the next generation of consoles, like PlayStation 5 or Xbox. I don't know if that game was actually on the Xbox, I don't think, although I may be wrong, but either way. So I suppose there's technically the final thing I want to classify for something, and that's what appears to be for the fact that when it comes to Tokyo Game Show for 2025, I'm pretty sure we're actually going to be getting some more game selections, but for the sake of Sega and Athletes. So, for instance, when it comes to those specific games they're trying to bring in over into the Tokyo Game Show, which appears to be Football Manager 26 for PC and all that stuff. And they're also trying to bring Persona 3 Reloaded for Nintendo Switch 2, being playable in Tokyo Game Show. And there's also Persona 5 The Phantom X for PC and iOS phones and Androids. So, and there's also Sega Football Club Championship, or Champions 2025 for, you know, PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 and PC and iOS and phones for its novelty. And of course, not to mention though, Sonic Racing Cross Worlds for PS5 and Xbox Series X/S and Xbox One, PS4, Nintendo Switch, PC, and Nintendo Switch 2. They are all going to be playable on the Tokyo Game Show. So, and they're also trying to bring in Virtual Fighter 5 REVO World Stage version for the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X/S, and Nintendo Switch 2, and PC. They are all going to be playable in Tokyo Game Show. So, and finally, most notably, there are some mysterious games that it did say coming soon, Title 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm very curious to know what the games are, but I'm sure enough that we'll find out more about it at some point later on in September. So because of that though, yeah, my expectations of these game events for not only for tomorrow, but in addition to by the end of the month in September, is going to be staggeringly high. So, and yeah, for the most part though, when it comes to other iPhone prices, it's going to be pretty pricey. Like, for instance though, For iPhone 17, it's going to be cost about $800, and then meanwhile for iPhone Air, it's going to be $1,000. And then when it comes to iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max, when it comes to Pro version, it's going to be cost around $1,100. And then for Pro Max version, it's almost going to be roughly $1,200. So yeah, it's going to be pretty pricey, especially noticeable when it comes to likely for new models always attempts to come in. And then as a result though, is about the fact that it's always going to be something else entirely when it comes to price tags alike. So, and the only thing I was generally surprised about actually, that's what appears to be for the fact that they somehow ignoring the forms of the iPad scenario, which I'm not entirely sure why they somehow skipped over the iPad category. Which, I know for the fact that, well, generally speaking, iPhones are more popular, although iPhone's a little bit strange too. It's about the fact that iMac was also ignored on that particular event as well. So, again, I'm not entirely sure why they somehow ignoring those specific aspects. Well, truth be told, though, it's about the fact that we, you know, discuss upon a larger amount of things for today, especially because no matter what, though, that's still, I'm incredibly excited until what's to come, so... Alright, so next mini-game, so let's see, are we going to be playing next? We're going back to 2 versus 2 again, and we are going back into Diffuse or Lose again, so... Although, suffice to say though, it's about the fact that these mini-games in particular will be the final time we can able to actually experience these, just before we realize about the fact that our Let's Play of Super Mario Party Jamboree is almost about to come to a close, so... You know, it's kind of a shame though, because I still managed to really enjoy Super Mario Party Jamboree as it is, specifically for Switch 1 version, but I highly doubt it for Switch 2 version to me though, but that's just mainly because no matter what though, again, we'll get into more details about that until specifically not only for tomorrow, but in addition to the majority of next week as well. So because of that though, again, stay tuned for those. So anyway, so we've once again won, so either way though, everything else checks out there basically. So I believe we're now on to turn number 23, so geez, we are definitely going to be very close towards the end of this.